and welcome to RC's Rail Fanning Productions. It is the early morning of July 14th, 2023. Today we are in Arcade, New York on the Arcade and Attica Railroad. Today, Alec Durfee and Mark Klingel would be hosting a photo charter featuring the ANA's classic center cab GEs. Today's charter would feature the center cabs pulling all sorts of freight and passenger consists throughout the entirety of the railroad. Without further ado, here comes our first photo run-by of the day over Cattaraugus Creek. We then relocated and prepared for the second run-by. After our run-bys over the Cattaraugus Creek, we boarded on the foam mobile and backed up into Arcade, where our next photo shoot would occur at the Y. For our run-bys here at the Y, we can see a classic example of what the Arcade and Attica mixed freight trains would have looked like. After this run by here, we boarded back on the train and headed towards Reisdorf Brothers. Here is where the train passes the Arcade Attica's arcade yard, where many pieces of old equipment are stored and where the shops are at. In a moment, you will see the Arcade Attica's newest addition to the fleet, Arcade Attica number 114, formerly Western New York and Pennsylvania Railroad number 406. Additionally, you can see Arcade Attica number 18's tender sitting outside the shop, which is being worked on right now. This clip here showcases the previous years of the Arcade Attica along with the future years of the ANA. The railroad has quite the extensive history as to how it became and some of the challenges it faced along the way. This locomotive here, number 406, which is now 114, is the first Alco locomotive to find its way on the property of the Arcade and Attica Railroad. Before the Alcos and the General Electric center cabs were on the railroad, it was served by steam locomotives in the late 1800s. The line for the railroad was built in 1881 and was completed in 1885 with the connection up to the Pennsylvania Railroad. The line was meant to connect Arcade and Attica, New York, together. In 1917, a stockholder group of guys ended up buying the railroad for $79,000 and named it the Arcade and Attica Railroad. Up until the 1940s, the railroad was powered by steam locomotives. However, after World War II, things vastly changed when the diesel locomotive was introduced, and therefore the Arcade and Attica had General Electric center cab locomotives. To this day, number 112 and 113 still operate. Throughout the years that the center cabs have powered the ANA, they've seen quite a few challenges. In 1957, a major washout washed over half of the line out between Attica and Reisdorf Brothers in New York. The damages were estimated to be about $72,000, which at the time the stockholders did not have the money to repair it. That year, many management problems occurred and the Arcade and Attica Railroad faced many challenges. However, new reforms came in and the Arcade and Attica Railroad was set straight, with a line now between Arcade and Reisdorf Brothers. Since then, the ANA has been powered by the same General Electric center cab locomotives and has been thriving ever since with passenger runs and freight runs. However, freight traffic has vastly picked up in the past few years, and it's time for an upgrade for the railroad. With the new CEO of the Western New York and Pennsylvania Railroad selling off the Alco power, the Arcade and Attica jumped on the opportunity to purchase Alco RS3U number 406. This now allows the ANA to pull longer trains with less crews involved. As of May 2024, 406 has been renumbered to 114 and has been pulling freight runs to Rydorf Brothers. This locomotive is the first Alco, or American Locomotive Company, locomotive to find its way onto Arcade and Attica main lines. So far, it's been doing well in pulling off its freight operations. At this point, we pass by the Arcade and Attica's depot where they load on passenger excursions, and we're currently going through Arcade, New York. An interesting fact about the railroad is that none of the railroad crossings, at least from July of 2023, have lights or gates on them. Many of them are just the crossbucks. A few in town have traffic lights that are connected to the track with the sensor. Just outside of downtown Arcade, we go by the classic Arcade and Attica 111, a GE 44 tonner, along with a few A&A cars. In a moment, we'll be going over the Cattaraugus Creek, which is where our first photo run-by was at. Our next photo run-by would be right next to the Arcade, New York Volunteer Fire Department, where the Arcade and Attica snowplow is kept on static display. If you remember how I said earlier that the A&A had no crossings with lights and gates, well, that has since changed since July of 2023. Two busy highways intersect the Arcade and Attica main line in North Java, New York, so the A&A decided to replace the crossings with lights and gates. Prior to this, the train would have to stop and flag the crossing to make sure that no cars would go through. As I mentioned, before the center cabs came, steam was the primary dominator of the A&A mainline. However, after World War II, the center cabs entered the A&A for service. There were 4 center cabs that served on the A&A or currently do serve for the A&A, which is numbers 110 to 113. 110 was the first one. It was built in 1941 in Erie, Pennsylvania at the General Electric Locomotive Works. It was classified as a General Electric 44 tonner, and the Arcade and Attica really had a good time with the locomotive, so they bought a second one in 1947, number 111. The main reason for buying 111 was because of 110's wreck. However, 110 was fixed, and now they had 2 General Electric 44-ton locomotives. However, 110 started to fall apart, and it was having many mechanical issues, so the A&A bought a replacement for it, which was 112. 112 was built in Erie, Pennsylvania in 1944 for the United States Navy during the end of World War II. It ended up at the Colorado Springs Railroad, where it was purchased by the A&A and now serves on their roster. A&A 113 has a much different story than the others. It was built in 1959 in Erie, Pennsylvania as a 50-tonner. It served in a handful of factories up until 2014 when the A&A bought it. It was bought as a backup for 111, which is sitting by the shops for freight operations. However, it was built as a 50-ton locomotive but has weighted trucks, making it an 80-ton locomotive. So overall, all four center cab locomotives that the A&A has operated are still on the property, with 110 being on static display, 111 being by the shops getting worked on potentially, and then 112 and 113 still hauling freight. This section of the A&A main line has a lot of bodies of water on the sides, including Ghost Pond, which you'll see in just a few moments up ahead. Here we'd have a few different shots, some crossing shots, close, far, you name it.
Are we able to get that for this next run by when we end up doing it? Are we able to get that horn show we talked about? Yeah, I can have him do that.
And for our second run by, we indeed got a horn show.
My air down has one run. Absolutely.
Well, they kind of got it. It's hard to 112, you're good to bring it to a stop.
At this point, we've reached the end of the line. Here we'll have a few meets and photo run-bys. In the background is the Rasdorf Brothers grain mill. Here, the two locomotives separated, and they separated their cars as well to make it look like a freight and passenger run-by. After the photo run-bys at Reisdorf's, the two locomotives coupled up and grabbed their load as we went westbound for another photo run-by at Ghost Pond. Here we head westbound and we stop at the North Java Depot. Heading back west, we find ourselves at one of the busy highways that intersects the A&A, where the light and gate crossing will soon be put in. Immediately following our train's passage through the crossing, the crews began work, getting the lights and gates prepared.
Days ago, actually no, yesterday, until Michael lost there, he was sharing a post that Pennsylvania State Park.
On our way back westbound, we stopped at the classic Courier's Depot for a few photo run-bys and a neat scene of passenger and freight. Here we can see one of the Arcade and Attica steam locomotives on static display.
Very good there, Alan. Okay, I was going to back up towards the road, but here's good.
We have a second run by here at Courier's after a brief relocation to across the street.
That's good there, 112.
Even further inland, almost to Arcade, we stopped by one of the crossings where the engineer Dean put on one hell of a horn show for us. They blew the two M5s so hard that they had to stop and build up air before they could move again. This time around, I tried for a more artsy-fartsy shot with the pond in it, and yet we had another horn show. Back in downtown Arcade, we can see the Fulmer Express pulling in for its final photo run by the day. A couple thank yous go out to Alec Durfee and Mark Klingel in the Arcade and Attica Railroad.
You can go right up to Mill Street and stop.